All right, another bite-sized training. There are some changes going on in seminaries and institutes. We've talked about, we've mentioned, we've probably even spent a little bit of time looking at this same document. But just for those of you who are maybe new to the calling or are just not aware, there are four major requirements for a student to earn credit towards seminary graduation. And this is for every semester. So there's 8 semesters that they got to do this in order to earn credit towards seminary graduation. And those four are: there's a reading requirement in the scriptures, which we'll talk about today. There's the attendance requirement, we'll talk about later. An assessment requirement, talk about later. And then the last one is an ecclesiastic endorsement, or what do we call that? It's what it's called, right? An endorsement.
Yeah, yeah, it comes from the bishops
Right.
to the stake president.
Those are kind of your four requirements. If a student wants to earn credit towards graduation, they got to do those four things each semester they're in seminary, right? And they got to do that each year. We're just going to talk about the reading requirement because this is the one that's probably changed the most over the years. So you want to run us down? How has this changed over the years?
So when I started teaching, the requirement was to read the whole book of scripture. So for studying the Book of Mormon that year, we were going to complete the Book of Mormon. It was you completed it or you didn't complete it.
Yeah.
It then went to daily reading, and so it was you had to read at least 75% of all calendar days, and then it was personal goals, reading goals, and then it was 75% of that reading goal. And then now we have a new reading requirement that's I think going to be a huge blessing to teachers and students and leaders, because it's so much more manageable. The last one was a little bit confusing for people, and this one is absolutely accomplishable and will give us a good baseline to work from.
Right. This is a good mix of a couple of the previous requirements. For some students, it was super confusing that they were required to read a book of scripture at seminary that was different than what they were studying at home, or even when a bishop were to make a challenge for them to read the Book of Mormon, it was like this really weird, like competing.
Sometimes they'd be studying 3 different books, right? If they
Right.
were doing the Sunday school, seminary, and like a Book of Mormon challenge.
Right. So here's the change. The new reading requirement starting in the fall of 2023, right? Is that there is about 60 specifically selected pages of scripture from the book of scripture that we're studying in Come Follow Me that term that will be required reading. Oh, sorry, I said that wrong. 60 pages for that entire year. So 30 pages
Right.
each semester.
Right.
And they're specific, they're chapters, and that's required. It's like the baseline. Okay.
Show the list real quick
So,
so they can see what you
oh,
mean.
sorry, it's a different page. Here's
Yeah.
the example. So, for example, we're doing the second half of the New Testament starting in the fall. So we'd be down here in the second semester here: Acts chapters 1 through 12, Romans 8, 1 Corinthians 13, Hebrews 11, and 2 Timothy 3. About 30 pages. Now, some of us can get real weird about this because there's some good stuff that's not included in this, right? It doesn't include
I
any
hope
of
so.
the,
That's not even a big portion of the book of scripture. I hope there's good stuff out there.
yeah, there's just so much there. So if we're
Yeah.
to there's a couple of reasons why this is the way it is, right? Number one, this gives us some opportunities to give freedom for students to set their own personal reading. They have to read
Right.
those chapters. That's required. But on top of that, we're encouraging personal scripture study goals that can be intrinsically motivated that they would do, right? But there's some
Right.
challenges with that. How do we do that?
So, I mean, it's going to take a lot of work, uh, on us as leaders and teachers. This is what President Eyring says. He says this will require more personal, individual attention from teachers. It will add a burden but it is a burden teachers should be glad to carry because their personal ministries are as important as their classroom instruction. If anyone can do it, your teachers can. They are wonderful. And that's this is very much in line with the leaders of the church and their vision for what it's going to take to help these youth become the adults that they need to become. If you compare this type of approach to something like the Children of Youth program, with those three principles: be with them, connect them with heaven, and let them lead. Right. And so much around what is the Lord telling them, uh, is a vision that he's giving them, and how are they setting goals and making plans to accomplish that. And so these reading requirements aren't the summit of the mountain. They're not the ceiling. They're the floor. Right. We want them to start there, but it's going to take some effort, and there will be training coming from us and things like that to help them to set meaningful goals, to inspire them to be led by the Spirit, to have a really meaningful experience with Scripture.
Yeah. The only thing, if I were to take us to this reading requirement, the only thing that you need to be recording, for example, is that they are reading, that they have read those 30 required pages for each semester.
Right.
And in WISE, it's actually not quite up to where we are with this requirement. If a student, if we have like a bookmark where they can actually track the chapters that they're completing, if they have completed those required readings, you will just click the box under the reading requirement in that section in WISE where you record it. You're just going to click that mark all readings box. They did it. They read those 30 pages. And if they did not, you will just not complete, you won't check that box showing that they didn't read the 75%, right?
Right.
Which is fine, because this document here that has all of these chapters is also going to be used as makeup work for reading requirements in the past. And so if they don't finish these and you don't mark that they did it, and they get to the next semester and they want to make it up, great. You just tell them to read those chapters, and then you can just mark that. It's just that easy.
Much more manageable than previous iterations of this, right?
The additional thing is, when it comes to these intrinsically motivated goals, your job is to train them in goal setting and encourage and mentor and invite. But you and I are actually going to have very little to do with what goal they set, and ultimately whether they complete it or not. We don't track it. We don't record it. We're just assisting them with taking their scripture reading to the next level.
Yeah, this is something we're still trying to wrap our heads around as leaders in the church, is the idea of letting the youth lead, right? And sometimes you see people on one side of the spectrum that will manage everything for the youth that they work with, and on the other side that they don't do anything, right? And they kind of lead it up. And there's some skill in helping to develop a skill set and habits amongst these youth without taking over and bulldozing them.
Right.
And so there's definitely going to be more training on that to come.
And I would also emphasize that Chad Webb called these intrinsically motivating scripture study goals. And
but what if I like Snickers and you have Snickers? Can you motivate?
There's going to need to be a little bit of some thinking outside of the box on what that looks like and how we can encourage it.
Yeah.
Yeah.